What is up, fight fans? Jordan Kurtz here with the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. You can give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. We have a very special program for you here today. We have lots to talk about, from the UFC to some current events that are very concerning, if you will, within the combat sports and sports entertainment related world out there. And we have a special guest on the program today, and current world champion and also former world champion of many major organizations out there in Juan Archuleta, going to be on the program today. But first and foremost, I want to give a huge shout out to everybody at the Mile High Sports crew. If you can, please smash that like, share, and subscribe button wherever it is possible. They are doing everything that they can to give you the latest and greatest on the sports front coverage. Right now, obviously, all eyes are on the Broncos. This is a Broncos town here in the Mile High City. So they are on the forefront of most people's focus here in the city. You have CU garnering their headlines. You have the Avalanche in off-season talk, as well as the Denver Nuggets. And then there's also the Rockies. The Rockies sitting there at a 38-94 clip. So, they've at least escaped the dubious honor of being the fastest team to reach 100 losses. But that all being said, there's still 30 games left in the regular season. And that being said, there's still the potential that they might very well be the worst team in baseball when it's all said and done, or the worst record in baseball history when it's all said and done. As an extra kick in the shorts, the last piece of the worst trade in modern Major League Baseball history that saw the Rockies part ways with future Hall of Famer Nolan Arenado is now no longer with the club either. None of those pieces worked out. None of those prospects ended up doing anything of value for the club that brought anything remotely worth a return for somebody like Arenado, but completely different point, and I'll let those guys handle that discussion. If you can, please like, share, and subscribe to the Mile High Sports Network, whether that be on socials, the podcast network, the website, anything out there possible. Please make sure that you follow and support the Mile High Sports Network. Moving along from that, we're going to recap the UFC Shanghai card real quick. Over in Shanghai, you had Johnny Walker go play spoiler in the main event, and he went out there and devastated the hometown kid in Ming Zhang. He TKO'd him in the second round. Devastating performance out there. The antics of Johnny Walker have always been entertaining. Having his brother Walter there in the mix now, I think just kind of adds to the fan lore, or the fan, I don't, maybe it's hard to say fan favorite, but the appeal of Johnny Walker, him having his brother around in the mix and the banter that they have. Or this last weekend, they made a whole big ordeal of the social media post of Johnny Walker shaving his mustache off just to basically have like the Dagestani beard, and they posted that reel with the song that Hamzat walks out to. So, like I say, they have great personalities, and those two being around with each other, it's kind of letting each of them thrive and grow within the spotlight. In the co-main event, there was some controversy with this fight, folks. Going into it, there was the questions, oh, was this fight off? Was it canceled? It was reported to be canceled by many sources, but then it was back on. It was never actually canceled. It was just a brief visit to the hospital for Brian Ortega. It's time to have this conversation that Brian Ortega is done at 145 pounds. He had the issues International Fight Week last year for the Diego Lopez fight, which ultimately saw Dan Ige step up on just a couple of hours' notice. Only time that's ever happened. And then you have this situation where the fight ultimately was contested at 153 pounds because of the issues that Ortega had. Brian Ortega in general, I've been a big fan of his for a long time in his UFC run. His jiu-jitsu and his submission skills are some of the best when he's been at his peak in his run, but also at the same time, over the last few years, and especially ever since he had his initial title fight, I just feel like the activity level that we've seen from Brian Ortega, whether it be due to injury, situations outside of the cage, or whatever else, that hasn't done him any sort of favors in garnering momentum going forward and trying to make another run towards the top of either division. I think now it's to the point, if you're the UFC, you force his hand and you make him have to go to 55. He's talked about it on a couple of occasions, but yet he's still been matched up as a featherweight. Now I think that, hey, you can't trust that he's going to go out there and step on the scale at 146 pounds. It's not going to happen. Last two fights, or those two instances right there, those show that he has issues with it. There's been many of other fights where he has had horrendous weight cuts, where people have online wrote about, reported, all the whispers from the people in the back saying how just terrible that he looks. I can speak to it directly from sources years ago when he went over and fought on Fight Island in Abu Dhabi, where the entire flight he was completely miserable. I mean, was curled up, was cramping, was in intense pain for the entire multi-hour flight all the way overseas. Making 45 is an issue for T-City. He should not be somebody that they consider to continue to be in that mix at 145 pounds. On the flip side, you had Aljamain Sterling, who, after winning, called for a title shot. I don't think it's happening. I mean, Aljo brought up great points of his resume, what he's done in the past, him being a former champion of a different division, has came up and done nothing but what the company has asked for him, has gone out and won fights, has beat contenders in the process. But it seems like Lerone Murphy is the guy right now. And based off of the look of Aljo's elbow in the video that he posted in the most recent, in the last couple of days, I don't know that Aljo is going to be returning to action anytime in 2025 anyway. So that's kind of a moot point discussion. Moving along from there, Sergey Pavlovich put together back-to-back wins for the first time since getting his title shot back in 2023. And yes, he won over Waldo Cortez Acosta, but at the same time, from what I see, the aura of him being this just juggernaut who runs through people's face in the first round and was just blitzkrieging people in the first minute of the first round, that mystique is gone. He fights different now. He's much more tentative since he got knocked out by Aspinall. And then getting beat, and he didn't look right in the Volkov fight. He looks like a guy who doesn't have his confidence anymore. And while he's winning, and that could be something that he rallies and finds again, and it could be just something that, hey, he just needs to find that rhythm one time and then he's back in a flow, especially at heavyweight where all it takes is one. But right now, he looks like a fighter who is fighting with fragile confidence. That's the best way that I can put it. You had the young Gage Young picking up his first UFC win. Veteran of the Contender Series, longtime fixture of the FAC promotion out there in the Kansas City area. This is a kid who the UFC obviously thinks that they have something in that they gave him that Contender Series opportunity so early on in his early 20s. He is under the tutelage of UFC veterans and guys who have years and years worth of experience, like Zach Cummings, Jason High. There's a lot of guys that are surrounding him in Kansas City that are going to help bring him along in the process. Also want to give a huge shout out to the Energy Charles Johnson for derailing yet another hype train while on this UFC run that he's had. Charles Johnson himself is a former LFA champion. This guy has earned absolutely everything in the game that he's gotten. I mean, not too many times do you even see in the LFA does somebody have to go and defend their title multiple times before they get the opportunity to get to the big show. Well, that was the situation that Charles found himself in, and he did it. He just steps up and accepts the opportunities when they present themselves, and he goes out there and he fights his tail off every single time. In this particular matchup, he was definitely not the guy that the UFC saw as the A side. It's obvious to see that in some ways. I mean, you had Loner Kavanaugh, who is of Chinese heritage, that was the undefeated hype train prospect. Well, Charles Johnson didn't listen to any of that hype. Charles Johnson went out there and delivered Loner Kavanaugh his first career loss and TKO'd him in the process. If you guys remember to just over a year ago here in the Mile High City at Ball Arena, he knocked out Joshua Van in the third round. Yes, Joshua Van that is about to go challenge for the UFC flyweight title. So on any given night, the energy is in the mix with anybody at 125 pounds. And moreover, from what's been done in the cage by him, or some of his message that he's delivered on social media, any of that, from a personal standpoint, from a man-to-man standpoint, Charles Johnson is a good dude. I've had the pleasure of knowing Charles for years now. I mean, I've got to chop it up with him in multiple cities across the country while being out there for shows and for UFC cards. He's fought teammates of mine. He's came to the gym. We were in the barbershop at the same time last year, all that, just so many different things. He is a good dude. He's a good dad. He loves his family. He's going out there and fighting and try to do absolutely everything that he can to provide for his wife and his children. So on that front, man, I just tip my cap to Charles Johnson because he goes out there and again, he just works. He goes out there, puts in the grind, and lets the chips fall where they may. He has the confidence that when it's all said and done, he will be in the mix with those top contenders. And, hey, I'm all for it. Again, Charles Johnson works his tail off. He's a good dude, and he's a guy who has a skill set that flies under the radar, and people don't give him the respect that he deserves. Plain and simple. In another return to the octagon, you had Kyle Daukaus making his return to the octagon after a detour onto the regional scene. He was obviously on the wrong side of a couple of fights during his first run with the UFC. That's why he was released and had to go back, get a couple of wins. And then, well, lo and behold, in this matchup against Michel Pereira, he sent him to the place where time doesn't exist, folks. That's such a crazy thing for this game, too, when we look at it, right? Because when you have a Michel Pereira, if you remember just a short time ago, Demoledor was thought of as being one of the next potential contenders. Just as fast as he was on an 8-fight win streak across multiple divisions, he is now on the wrong side of 3 losses in a row, with 2 of those coming by way of KO TKO. Just like that, the game can change so fast, folks. I mean, had an old coach, and even my pops for many a time said that the time that you go from the penthouse to the outhouse in professional sports is like that. And that seems to be the case right now for Michel Pereira. What's next for him on the wrong side of 3 in a row? I'm not sure. I mean, I think that what his next matchup ends up being will let us know what the UFC still sees in him. If it's a matchup where you look at it on paper and say, hey, this is kind of a favorable opportunity for him to go out there and get a bounce back, get some confidence in the process, then they still have faith. But if they give him an Ovi, his days are numbered. What do you guys think? Let me know on social media. You could hit me up on Instagram or on Threads at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. Stick around after the break, folks. We're going to be talking with Juan Archuleta, who will be fighting for an XFC world title here in just a couple of weeks. Stick around after the break. We'll be talking with Juan Archuleta. All right, fight fans, welcome back to the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. We are joined with a very special guest here today who is set to make his return to the cage in just a few weeks, looking to take the world by storm once again. We have the current Baroka champ, former Bellator and King of the Cage champ, a guy who has seen the world throughout his travels in the cage. We have the Spaniard, Juan Archuleta. How you doing, my man?
What's up, brother? Good. Thanks for having me on, all the Mile High Club guys. Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure to have somebody of your caliber on. It's I actually funny story. I got to see you fight live a few years ago when I was covering a Bellator
Oh,
show. It was I believe it was I want to say it was the spoon fight. My boy Joe Warren
oh,
fought on that
Jared,
card.
Thackerville.
Yep, exactly. Good old WinStar World Casino in Thackerville, Oklahoma. But
Yeah.
yeah, man. So I just wanted to, mention that right away off of the rip that, I got to see you way back once upon a time, but now, it's an honor for things to kind of come
Yeah.
full circle and get to chat with you here.
I appreciate it, man. That was like one of the first fights that I actually get into like a flow state where things were going smooth. I had a high punch volume, like things were landing flush, and like it just everything kept building up. I felt really good that fight. That was the first time on my feet that I was like, man, I'm gonna be things are going smooth, you know?
Oh, yeah, totally. Now, funny as that all is, you've been a world champion, traveled the world many times over. You've never fought in Las Vegas. Is that correct?
This is gonna be my first time in law. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely insane for someone who has the experience that you do, that you've never had the chance to fight in the fight capital of the world. But that all being said, that brings up the news point of why we're here today. You are going to be fighting for another title here in just a few weeks on September 20th for Baroka MMA presents XFC 53. You are going to be getting after it, like we said, in the fight capital of the world at the theater at the Virgin Hotels in Las Vegas. That's going to be against a UFC veteran, Jose Johnson. What are your thoughts as we approach this matchup or this card specifically, and knowing that this is potentially going to be a show that has a lot of eyes on it due to there not being another MMA card from any other major organization that weekend?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be, you know, people are going to tune into this because they're curious to know where's Juan at in his career, right? Like, where is the Spaniard falling at in his career? And right now, I feel like I'm the best I've ever been. And unfortunately, the sale with Bellator, Ryzen, there was a three fight hiccup a skid that I had there, but it was never like people didn't understand the travel that it took, like 10 hours there, 10 hours back, being there, trying to get there 10 to 14 days ahead of time just to get acclimated. You're traveling in the future, and then when you come back, you're traveling in the past. And then the weight cut dropping down to 134.4 is just like it added its toll. And then me trying to bump up to 45 after, it was like, man, it was a lot that I demanded out of my body, which I'm thankful I won the title there at Ryzen. But now to be here in America, and this is my second fight back, like pulling off now. Like the weight's not an issue, and the camp that I had, I was out of Morocco training with Nasserad and the guys at SPG Gym from the Netherlands, the straight kickboxers. They're some of are the best kickboxers in the world, like getting the repetition with them. And then the King of Morocco facilitating a place for us to train. Just super thankful for him and the opportunity he's given us MMA fighters, like, and the platform that we have to speak highly on Morocco. Like everything that we've experienced there was amazing. So all good energy going into this fight. Got a big viral knockout, and I'm ready to repeat that, going in there and smashing this dude and showing that, hey, I belong in the UFC. I'm ready to make my mark, and I've done my two fights to kind of get back acclimated into the cage, and I'm ready to show that.
Certainly. And that was a global and international viral knockout against Dennis Litton at Baroka 3. How does it feel to have a viral moment like that that's shared, millions upon millions of times, that has pretty much every talking head in the MMA pundit space that's going out there and giving their analysis or sharing it on their page and so on and so forth? What does that feel like? What's the fulfillment that you get after a gratifying performance?
It's nice because it shows the value I have as a fighting IQ fighter, right? Like it wasn't just a thrown knee just to throw it, right? The way I trapped him in, the way he committed on his jab, like anyone could throw a jumping knee and hopefully it lands, right? But to have him committed and him switching stance and having him to chase me and expose him for me to hit my timing, like it just now throw something big, get him engaged in the fight, and then take advantage of his carelessness and his recklessness of wanting to close the distance, you know? And I feel like, for the first time in my career, like, and make a statement, to make a statement for myself, like it's really gratifying because I hope I get knockout of the year this year at the Fighters Only Award, you know?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's certainly something that that puts you in high favor. It's a candidate that, as mentioned, I mean, it was shared millions of times over. I believe directly on the Baroka page by itself that there was, I think when I saw it earlier today, like 1.2 million shares or something on that one alone. That's not including some of the additional stuff from, your Robin Blacks of the world who went out and gave their Bink analysis and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that that's something
Right.
that sets the stage for all eyes to be on you for this main event as you take on a guy who does have that UFC credential behind his name. It's a good proving grounds platform for you to go out there and say, yes, I still have this and I am ready to go make my mark and take this next step forward in the big show. Is that fair?
Absolutely, because like you said, yeah, absolutely, because like you said, there's no fights going on that weekend. So even to have the possibility of UFC heads to show up just to in support of Randall Olliman, who's the promoter that has, done some great things in the background of the of for the UFC. It's like very capable of happening, right there at the Virgin Hotel. So why not they take a hop and a skip, jump down just to see some good fights that day?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And more than just, in the MMA space and some of these shows that they've had there, I believe it was the very first Baroka card where Sir Serkayev, the Hamzat Chimaev teammate and all that he was on, but Floyd Mayweather was at that show. So it just kind of shows that, if you're in Vegas and there's not maybe a fight event that's going on that weekend, all of those same personalities or personnel who are attracted to the product on the higher levels, well, they're still going to show up because that's an event for them to go be at, network, mingle, so on and so forth, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like to have guys like Floyd Mayweather, like for him coming and things like that it's gonna set a precedence for sure come fight night.
Certainly. Now, I want to ask you this question because we just talked about this being the first time in Vegas, but just because you haven't fought yet in Vegas doesn't mean that you haven't had the opportunity to fight in some of the most, I guess, storied, if you will, venues and places in the history of MMA. Is there any one venue or any one city, so on and so forth, or place or like fight culture that you fought amongst that stood out?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the Super Saitama Arena, out in Tokyo, Japan. Like that was by far one of the most iconic spots, winning my Ryzen title there. Just because like in this growing up in the sport, Dan Henderson's dad was my dad's coach. And so as a kid seeing Dan Henderson come and train while we were wrestling, with Heath Sims getting ready for fights and for him to be the only other American champion to win a Japanese title, and me being the second, it was like a dream come true.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of hoping that that would be the answer that you gave, just because, being the MMA nerd that I have been for so long, I feel like that's an environment that a lot of us, or at least someone from, I'm in my mid 30s, my generation, I grew up watching Pride. That was a big part of, I guess, my
Yeah,
formative years of becoming an MMA fan. So it's very few and far between that
right.
guys stateside have the chance to go over there and experience something like that. And I guess it's just kind of like for maybe those who are newer to MMA but no concepts of the other sports out there, that would be like if you got to go play in like Fenway Park or got to go play basketball against the Knicks at Madison Square Garden or something along those lines. That
Yeah.
is like one of those mecca style venues and arenas in the MMA world. And that's really awesome that
Yeah.
you got the chance to go out there and experience that. And it's an entirely different fight culture overseas than it is here stateside.
Absolutely, man. And I mean, even just to speak on Madison Square Garden, like I had a walk-off knockout at Madison Square Garden, you know.
Right.
So for me to choose Saitama over Madison Square Garden just lets you know the impact that Japan and the fight environment there has had on me, you know.
Right. Oh, exactly. And that's why I say, like, you have so many highly, I guess, grail type of venues that most fighters like that would be their dream to say, okay, well, I wanted to fight in MSG. I wanted to
Yeah.
fight, Super Saitama, all of these. The only box that you haven't checked off as far as a city yet
Yeah.
so far is Las Vegas. So, I mean, is that kind of a moment where now at
Absolutely.
this stage of your career, you can look back and say, man, like I've done some really cool stuff in this game?
Absolutely, man, because it's like the precursor of what's to come, you know? I don't know why my life has always been like this, but like I always get a little bit of something and then something big always happens right after it, you know? And it's just like this is a little bit of something where I'm defending my title for Baroka. And you know, they're a start off organization and XFC collabing together. And so it's good for them and it's good to be in Vegas with this, but this is just a precursor of what's to come, you know, and I think for me and my future here, to finish off my career and walk off in the sunset is going to be to sell out a T-Mobile Arena in Vegas. You know, I'm going to be here at the Virgin Hotel, at the Virgin Theater, and to be able to have that precursor of like, this is Vegas, this is the venue you're fighting in, this is the opportunity you have against an ex-UFC fighter. Now, what are you going to do to seize this moment? And I'm going to show that come fight night.
Absolutely. And you kind of hit on that a little bit, but to further that, you've got some seasoning on that proverbial cast iron there with the names that you've had the opportunity to share the cage with, champions of that sort, guys like Dudu Dantas, Pitbull, Sergio Pettis, Kaya Sakura, Rafian Stotts, all of those guys in the process. How does having the experience against guys who have that sort of metal, if you will, to them, how does having the experience against those other high level guys help parlay your efforts going into this fight against Jose Johnson?
Yeah, it's just like you know, definitely not to overlook my opponent. But you know, it's just like I'm set apart from you. Like, and I'm gonna prove this come fight night. I need to prove this, you know, and this is what I'm gonna do come fight night. I'm gonna go perform at the highest level of my capability, and he's not gonna be able to keep up, and he's gonna notice that right away. The speed, the power, the movement, the IQ is just gonna show in the fight, you know, and he's just gonna be lost. And you know, for me, it's gonna tell the UFC, look at, do you want me to keep taking these guys out that are down in the lower promotions to try to work their way up, and me continue to knock them off, or do you want to sign me and give me my opportunity to, you know, better my career and finish off in the sunset?
Very well said there. Now, in terms of the matchup itself, Jose Johnson himself, he was in the UFC, didn't have the longest run in the world, but did fight some tough guys in the process, traded some wins and some losses, but has also fought some tough guys on the regional scene. Do you think,
Absolutely.
stylistically, how does this play without revealing the curtain or peeling anything back too far, but stylistically, where do you see or how do you see this matchup playing out?
Yeah, you know, he's gonna try to keep his range and he's gonna try to keep me at bay, and he's gonna try to counter strike me. You know, I know if you see a lot of my film, you get the idea of, oh, if you just sit back and counter him because he rushes in, like, you know, this is gonna be a style to beat him. But what in my last fight, like, I'm not I'm willing to get in there and fight now. Like, I'm well rounded in MMA, and I showed that in my last fight. Like, good, take me down. Like, we're gonna scramble. We're by the next round, you're gonna be completely tired to even throw a punch, or you're gonna be outside of your game. That's when I strike, and that's when the iron's hot, and I'm gonna go in there and continue to put relentless pressure on you until you make that mistake where I'm gonna be able to take advantage and, you know, knock your lights out.
Speaking on some of that well-rounded aspect or having those different IQ elements of the game in the process, Can you talk to us for a minute about what the impact of somebody like a TJ Dillashaw in your career was, or has been, I should say?
I mean, every day was like, yeah, every day, training with them, like trying to keep up with them and trying to do these things that we when we were training, like, man, like how is he continuing stepping on the gas pedal, like, and like being in the situations you're like, dang, like this is really bettering because you're fighting for every position. And of course it's training camp and you're giving him a certain look. I know there was like some videos of him like throwing a head kick and I fell, and it kind of like rocked me, but that was me being a partner and trying to emulate a style that wasn't my style, right? So but you learn, like, okay, you have to change styles, you have to be able to emulate people and be able to change in a drop of a dime. So as far as training aspect, the impact that he has been tremendous because it opened up my ways in my career where I didn't care who I was facing after that. It was like, dude, I'm training with one of the best guys in the world in my weight division. Like, it doesn't matter. Same thing with Cub Swanson. I've been with him since the beginning of my career. We now have bloodline together and we're pushing these fighters through and we're giving our knowledge that we've shared off back and forth. And we're on the same wavelength. Last week we had four fighters in the LFA. Two of them were champions. They defended their belt. And, we lost the other two. But the two that lost were like, hey, what did I need to do to get better? And Cub and I drove on the way there and back. And we were literally on the same page. It sounded like I was talking when he was talking. It sounded like he was talking when I was talking because we just have that connection where we're like, hey, I think this fighter needs to do this and do these drills. And I think, and so that's what we implemented this week with Blaze Pods. I don't know if you see my social media lately, but I had to reach out to Blaze Pods like, hey, man, our decision making and some of the fighters are lacking. Like, and I feel like this is what Blaze Pods will utilize, help make decisions on a drop of a dime and make sure it's the right one. So it's having people like that have done the sport and getting into coaching and management that are helping like revolutionize the sport and it continue to revolve. And so those are the impacts that it's had on my career because they're like, hey, like maybe like right now, right? Like I lost in Ryzen and some people would have just gave up in my position. Would be like, okay, my career's done, like whatever, I'm okay with it. Who at that fought at a high level and was a champion at Bellator and at Ryzen would go back this many steps to take 10 steps forward. Yeah, it might have been some people say like, oh, you're taking 3 steps back, 4 steps back as a champion. That's crazy. Like you should just quit. And I was like, well, why? What kind of like what type of role model would I be to the guys that I'm coaching when I try to tell them, hey, it's okay with this loss. We have to continue to build. So showing this to the guys, they have opened their eyes and they trust me more. And they're like, oh man, like look at Juan's coming back and bettering himself and not giving up on himself, knowing he has a talent to still compete at the high level, but he's having to prove it now. And so that's what these guys, this is how the impact has been made by Cub Swanson, TJ Dillashaw, Joe Daddy Stevenson, and Dwayne Ludwig, and the list goes on. Nasrat Hopscott that I've been with Morocco was just telling me, just continue this path. You're great. So that's the meaning it's meant to me.
Man, that's a seven-layer dip of an answer right there that just gives me so many follow-ups that I'm gonna try to
Right.
attack with that right there. But so first thing that I want to hit on with that is you mentioned with you and Cub having bloodline, and I mean I've known a lot of a few of the guys through the years that you guys have helped with guidance along the way, like Dan Argueta to some of the other guys. I mean I shot photography at Dan's his pro debut way back in the day in Vail, just kind of ways of the years of all things connecting. But what does it feel like for you to be in a position now where there is that next generation of guys who are looking to you for leadership, for guidance, for those just mentorship opportunities? Because as you well know, a lot of times when young guys get into this sport, they're searching for something. And what that something is might be a little bit different for everybody. Sometimes it's a role model or a fatherly figure. Sometimes it's just a little bit of guidance in life. Sometimes it's a little bit of all of that. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a dad since I've done MMA, and I've coached at the high school program at St. John Bosco, where we've had multiple state champions and like pushing them into Division 1 wrestling, NCAA, Big Ten programs, Big 12, Pac 10, and all that. And so I approached it the same way. Now I get to approach it with adults, where it's a little more touchy because you have to watch like their confidence because MMA is a game of confidence. And I was lucky, and I'm sure he won't mind me speaking on this, is like Chris McCarty, right? Like he was a prospect to watch this past weekend at the LFA. And unfortunately, he had a fracture in his nose, and he was cleaning his nose in the corner, and his eye swelled up because all the blood went to his eye, and it was a doctor stoppage. And I had the fight going one round apiece, going into the third, and that the doctor stopped it and was like, oh no, this is done. So after we talk about the fight, like, hey Chris, like what could have you done, and or after watching it, like that you could progress if you would have went into that third round. And so and he came up to us and talked to us like before he was on a good winning streak, had a couple knockouts where he felt like he didn't need us, which is fine, right? Like, awesome, you're on a good path, but we still feel like you need to incorporate wrestling with your fighting and be more of a chain fighter than just a single like aspect fighter of like just boxing, just kickboxing, just wrestling. Now you have to have a blend of it with martial arts. You can't just do one thing and then try to wrestle someone right after. It doesn't work. And so being able to lead them and tell them my ideas, and them coming to me and saying, look, you're the best at this that I've ever seen, and I want help. And like now he wants help, and like having that figure is like, oh man, that's crazy. Like a real adult's coming up to me asking for help, that's looked up to me in the sport that, you know, sometimes we have our blinders on and we don't know who's looking up to us. And so that's what's cool about that. And that's the meaning of that. Like, you know, being a father figure, being a coach, and now being a training partner slash coach slash manager, like it's a great feeling to be able to help guys that need the help.
On the management side, this is where I feel like it's kind of the most touchy topic that's out there in general right now with the business right now. But there's your few big box agencies out there, right? That are kind of in a sense like, I don't know, I feel like it's shifted in the game to where at large, they're not necessarily agents or representatives of the athlete. There are a lot more times, or especially as it relates to the UFC, they're more or less they're a broker for matchups for the UFC. They take a high percentage, and there's a lot of guys who feel like they don't necessarily get the return for the percentage that they're putting out, whether that be for matchup opportunities, sponsorship deals, anything of the sort, or in some cases, even just getting responses from personnel. Being that you've had your
Right.
travels through the years, I'm sure that you've experienced your ups and downs with different management situations at times. How did that
Mhm.
did some of those for maybe at times, I'm really good friends with Brandon Royval, and he said part of what his mission in this is to help
Nice.
kids in like inner city or in lower income environments or at risk backgrounds that get into fighting. He feels like there's a lot of fighters that get taken advantage of just because of maybe it's a lack of education, a financial or socioeconomic status, so on and so forth. But guys get taken advantage of just simply because they don't have the wherewithal from the business end. Someone like you who has been around the block and has actually experienced it, does that mean something for you to then, hey, like, I want to help protect these guys from maybe being preyed upon?
Yeah, because it's a slippery slope because some fighters they see themselves as already UFC material, right? But it's like, okay, well, what do you offer to the UFC? Like, you have to kind of wake them up out of a dream that they're in, because some of these guys, they train with a Dustin Poirier, they'll train with Torporia, they'll train with me and Cub Swanson. They'll train like they're part of these big mega gyms, and sometimes they're really good and they'll be a good partner, but they automatically classify themselves as, oh, I should be making what these guys are making if they're making this much money. And it's like, hey guys, wake up, man. Like, I know you're this guy's workout partner and you're seeing what's left and what's right, but you're not focusing on what's down the middle for yourself. Like, you're saying you're not taking this fight because what, this guy has a good record and things like that. Like, I could tell my guys this, like, look at, I was 18-1 with 7 titles in the lower scene, 4 through King of the Cage, and I just kept racking up wins and saying, okay, I'm going to bring value to the company that I'm trying to fight for, you know? And luckily for me, like Bellator had offered more at that time and for sure thing. And, you know, UFC was right there on the line too. But I wanted to end myself at the UFC and I knew I wasn't ready. Like I was real with myself. And that's the hardest thing as a fighter, being real with yourself and saying, okay, what kind of value do I bring to the UFC? Now I could tell them, hey, I was a Rising champion. I was a Bellator champion. I had all these accolades through here. I came back down to the lower scene to win more titles. And that's what I'm trying to tell these fighters, like as a manager aspect, right? Like, hey, you got to have something of value that they could story tell, right? Like, for instance, we had Chapolin fight on the Ultimate Fighter. He lost his first fight. And he was devastated when he came home. He was like, "Man, like I think I'm just gonna move back to Brazil. Like there was my chance of the UFC." It was like, "Wait, wait, wait." I said, "We had a teammate of yours, Dan Aguilera, who lost it the first round of the UFC to the guy that won it, just like you." I was like, "Man, just go back and me, Cub, and Monty, and the Bloodline crew, and then so did DC had a long talk with them. They're like, hey, man, you have to defend this title. Like the guy won it." And they're going to give you a title fight. You're going to be able to defend it. Like, let's take this fight and see what happens. Boom, he gets a big knockout. And now something might be short notice that comes up, or something might be an opportunity might come for him. That's like, hey, stay in the gym and be ready. This might be your story that's going to be told. Now you have something to sell. I was the first fighter that got taken out of the UFC, or the Ultimate Fighter. Now I defended my belt. Now look at you're ready to go at the end of the year. Like this is what the UFC thrives for. So if the opportunity comes up for you, be ready. And so these are the experiences that we're trying to give as a managing aspect to be able to tell stories because people have to relate and people have to want to watch you fight. And so that's what the fighters are losing. They're seeing the big money, but they're not seeing how, the steps and the goals it takes to get there.
I think that that's a really good point that you put right there. And what value do you bring to the table? Because, yeah, I think that that's a fair thing to say that for every one guy who is going to promote the show and try to sell the cards, sell their fight, do their share, or go above and beyond with ticket sales, pay-per-view sales, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You're probably going to have, 4 or 5 fighters that's on that card, whether it's regional to locally based, that they do next to nothing for that in terms of the promotion or the awareness, right? So yeah, it does kind of have its balancing
Yes.
effect. And in the
Yeah.
modern climate of combat sports in general, not just MMA, there to be successful at the highest level or to get some of those bigger opportunities, it requires you to be more than just a talented fighter, right? Because if that's the
Yeah.
case, there would be a lot more guys that would probably get that chance or that would get that nod just by their actual X's and O's skill set. But when you're looking at these bigger organizations who are looking to invest money into you as the athlete, the potential superstar, or a branding element for their product, they're ultimately looking at what is the return that they're going to get from you, right?
Absolutely. Because if not, they're going to stick to guys like, Iridium, who has like a no, who's easy to deal with, that will say yes to the fights, that will just get a fighter in. But now you're working with the more boutique management where we're like, hey, we have to have something to sell for you, you know? Yeah, Iridium got the fight because they have a consistency of guys that are fleshing in that they know that they're going to already fight for this amount of money, and they also bring value because of the team that they have behind them. So now let's continue to build up. Like us, we have maybe about 15 fighters right now, and it is tough for us to get some guys knocking in on the door. But we have the 125 champion for LFA, the 145 champion for LFA, the 155 champion for LFA, myself, Cub Swanson, we had Dan Agueta, Danny Silva, and now we have Douglas, sorry, fuck, I'm drawing. He's going to be fighting on the Contender Series coming up on the September, the week before my fight. So it's like the second week of September, that's going to be on the Contender Series. So we're
Mhm.
starting to knock those doors down and we're starting to, really make statements here and we're excited for it.
That's awesome to hear that the business end of things is growing for you guys too as well. Because, as a fighter, or as an athlete, regardless of what your sport is, that path is going to come to an end at some day for everybody. But, the guys who maximize the opportunity of fighting or whatever their respective athletic career, you can use your platform to help parlay the next steps in life. And for some guys, that sets up the entire rest of your life to where you can maintain a presence and a space within the sport if you so choose. And if you do it right in some guys' cases, then it ends up being a thing where, you don't have to go back to whatever a regular job or whatever that sort of life is if you don't choose to do so, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you're helping out the next generation and helping evolve the sport.
Certainly. Now, a little bit more of a lighthearted question here for you. Lighthearted, but introspective at the same time is something that I like to ask each fighter that I talk with because it is something that's so different for every individual. Juan, is there maybe a song lyric, a quote, a Bible passage, maybe a movie scene, something along those lines that tells the tale of you for this camp?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It was actually I walked out to it in my last fight, and that's where, you know, I'm a believer in Christ, and I've had a strong relationship with the Lord, and I was listening to some Forrest Frank, and just his lyrics, it's like, man, I'm like Lazarus coming back from the dead and making an impact doing with this. It's like you thought I was down and out, but I'm like Lazarus. I just came up, and now I'm back. And it was a good saying for me, and that it made it impactful to walk out to that song, because it wasn't all luck. It was God, and that's what I thrive myself on. Like God has given me opportunity, and I've walked through those doors so many times, and the doors that I wasn't supposed to be in, they've closed on me, and I've never tried to reopen them, and I continue forward. And just like this journey in MMA, like I could have closed all the doors and walked away from it, but this opportunity with Broca came through, and then look at boom, a viral knockout helps out, and it puts me back on the map. Then it creates this next opportunity that happens a week after my birthday, because my birthday's September 13th, and it's just like, man, I won my belt on September 12th, going on September 13th against Patchy Mix. Like around this time is usually when big happen in my life, and I'm ready for it, and I'm solid and grounded for these things to happen in my life, because all aspects of my life have been covered and strongly rooted, and I have God to thank for that.
Awesome, man. I love hearing that. That's a well formulated response for that there. Now, Juan, as we start to tie things up here, is there anybody that you want to give a shout out to, sponsors, teammates, coaches, anybody before we tie things up here?
Absolutely, the crew at Bloodline, they picked me up when I was down, and they continue to help me develop and want me to coach them, and so that brought the reignition into me to go out there and practice what I preach, and so I'm super thankful for them, my family, my wife, and my kids. Right now we're on a volleyball. My daughter's playing volleyball; she's crushing it with my niece, and they have a big season coming up, and then my son's wrestling at Orange Lutheran. It's school down here in Orange County. I'm really looking forward to that. And then all my sponsors for sure. Dime Industries. Mike over here. I was actually in a meeting with him earlier, and just the mental aspect that he tells me, like, dude, you're a fucking champion, go out there, and like that's the mentality you have to have. And sometimes we forget that because MMA humbles you a lot, so
Oh yeah.
I'm like, damn, you're right, Mike. Okay, cool. So the guys at Dime Industry, they'll be a big part of this part of my coming up for this fight. I actually have him in the corner because of how well he's been working with me on confidence and just all mentality base, and Hans Molenkamp with Monster, they've been, absolutely believing in me from the beginning to now. They're a Hans is California based, so he used to come to my fights and just tell me like, "Man, you're gonna be the champion. I promise you. Like, your work ethic is by far the greatest I've ever seen. Like, keep killing it." And I won the Bellator belt, and he was like, "I told you, man. Like, congratulations. The sky's the limit for you." And then winning the Ryzen, he was so pumped. He was like, he's like, "Come down to my shop. We'll make you a knife." He made me a badass knife.
Awesome.
So I'm super thankful for him and his belief he has with me. It's just like with MMA and outside of MMA, Hans is just an amazing dude for myself, and Legacy Builders, they've been with me for a long time. Steve Martin, thank you for all the help. And we have also the people that sponsor Bloodline and our team. We really appreciate them. We've been crushing it with them. It's been like Chronic Tacos. Who doesn't like tacos, right? And then American Weed Co. As far as the meat company, and just all the guys that we've been working with. Like, thank you guys so much. We truly appreciate you guys.
Man, you got a whole squad there in your corner supporting you. Juan, where can people follow you?
On Instagram and on X, it's J Arch MMA. So it's the J, first couple letters of my last name, ARCH, and then MMA.
There you
So
have it
some
right
people
there.
they're always asking like, they're like, how do you say it? How do you say your Instagram handle? I was like, bro, it's just my first name and last name. I said it's just like a J Arch, and they're like, oh, that makes sense. I was always trying. People are always trying to figure it out. It's like, no, it's just Juan Archuleta, just abbreviated.
Like, come on, guys, use some context clues here. You don't got to make it too complicated, right?
Yeah, they're like Jarch MMA. I'm like, no, man, it's just J Arch.
All right, folks. Well, that wraps it up. That's all the time that we have here today with the world champion here, Juan Archuleta. But Juan, we are looking forward to seeing you back in action at the cage in Baroka MMA presents XFC 53, going down at the theater at Virgin Hotels with the main card starting at 7 p.m. for us watchers out here in the Mountain Time Zone. That is going to be on September 20th against Jose Johnson. Guys, you don't want to miss that card. There's no other major MMA events that are going on that weekend, so all eyes should be on this show. Check out Juan, and yeah, Juan, thank you so much for joining us here on the MMA Plug.
appreciate I appreciate you guys, and thanks you guys for tuning in. Thank you for the audience, and thanks for having me on, Jordan. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Juan. Thank you so much, my man. You have a great day, and folks, stick around after the break. We'll be back with more combat sports coverage. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. We're going to get into 3 rounds. It's a little bit more of a long form today than our quick hitting 3 rounds just because of the nature of the topics here. But without further ado, let's dive in, shall we? Very first topic that I want to talk about today for 3 rounds, it has to be Raja Jackson. That was premeditated attempted murder. There's really no way around it. Yes, there's the folks that are saying that Raja has been a victim of emotional abuse and bullying, and he was pushed to his breaking point. Okay. Just because you've been bullied and you have daddy issues still as a 25-year-old man does not give you the green light to go put someone within an inch of their life. Yes, Psycho Stu hit him with a gimmicked can in the back area, but that's because he thought that he was a worker. And in Stu's defense, it's not hard to see how he would have came to the conclusion or came to the thought that Jackson was, in fact, a worker. It looks like they were in the back area of what was a restricted access zone where it was nothing but other performers. This was a Knox Pro, little local indie show out there in California that this happened at. And Raja Jackson, being that he is Rampage's son and also a pro MMA fighter himself, very much looks the part of an athlete and someone who could be involved in the business, who could be a worker and a performer. You couple that with him having a cameraman on him doing his live stream the entire time. Well, an older vet in the business like Stu, who is upholding the principles of kayfabe, which for those who are unfamiliar with that term, that's essentially suspending the disbelief. That's, the work, that's the character, that's the performance angle of professional wrestling. Stu, yes, he did go up to Jackson and tried to generate some cheap heat by hitting him with the gimmick can. But again, that was a worked shot. It's not like he just went up there and wailed on him with a full can or with malicious intent and just conked him on the dome. That's not at all what happened. Stu was trying to generate some heat with Jackson to be able to work an angle on the program later on that night for Jackson to come in and then be able to get a receipt or be able to have a back and forth. When Stu realized that Jackson was in fact not a performer, he adamantly apologized. This is on camera. He apologized to him and told him that, hey, I thought you were working, in the back here. We're usually always working. I saw you with the camera and thought that this was copacetic. I thought this was all good. Jackson shook his hand and accepted the apology. Wise to the business, which, I mean, I don't blame the bookers and the show promoters for doing. They used this natural conflict that occurred to then actually go ahead and try to work the angle of Jackson interfering in the match by giving Stu a receipt in the ring when they would give the signal when the time would come. In all honesty, that could have been a golden moment for Raja to go start making a path for himself. But instead, he was so mentally fragile that he let his emotions and his kick live stream chat gaslight him into going out there and committing attempted murder for the world to see. At minimum, that's felonious assault with great bodily injury. And for some, they're out there asking, well, what took so long to stop it? Why did it take anybody that long for him to get pulled off? So on and so forth. Those questions of that nature. Well, there's answers within a couple of things there. A, him interfering was a called spot. So him getting into the ring wasn't unexpected. So that's why as soon as he entered, you probably, why there's not someone going and running and immediately flooding and stopping it. That was a planned spot. They told him that he could get his receipt. But in wrestling, a receipt means a stiff shot back. That doesn't mean attempted murder. B, the referee in a pro wrestling bout is not a real referee. That is a paid performer that is a part of the entertainment act. They're not equipped with the knowledge or the skill set in most cases of how to grapple and pull somebody who is attacking someone with malicious intent. They're not equipped with that sort of skill set. That's not their job. C, as heinous as this was, there are some indie shows out there who do run these deathcore matches in which there are unimaginable levels of damage that the performers consent to. This might be the only saving grace that Jackson has, depending on what the agreement between these two guys was, and we won't know any more of that unless we can have an actual statement from Stu. And at what mental capacity will Stu be once he's ever beyond being in the hospital in critical care? And then lastly, D, Raja is a trained fighter. Again, folks, he's a professional MMA fighter. He was not about to just stop. His nature from the sport that he participates in is you go until somebody pulls you off. It isn't that you go and then you just stop on your own nature. So it did take another performer to go in there and intervene. And at that, Raja tried to fight that guy too. He tried to double leg him. And the crazy part in this is that Raja documented all of this. He put this whole crash out on stream for the world to see. There are some people who are calling out Rampage or sending Rampage threats saying that because of all the bullying that he's done to him and making Raja the butt of all of his jokes, that pushed him to the point of having a psychotic break. no chance can you put this blame on Rampage. Yes, is that probably a factor that the kid had some demons and some inner turmoil from being the butt of jokes, or dare we call it being bullied? Sure. But again, that does not give you the justification to go out there and go into business for yourself doing what he did. To speak on the acts alone, Stu was expecting him to come in. So, yeah, he did not stop the slam from happening because he expected Raja in there. What he didn't expect was to be slammed on his head the way that he was, to then be followed up with 22 stiff shots, stiff punches to the face, while Raja had him mounted while unconscious. Crowd videos have people speaking about how bloody Stu's face was from the punches that Raja delivered. Reports state that Stu has been placed in a medically induced coma, that he's lost most of his teeth, that he has multiple facial bone breaks, he has brain swelling, he when he was awake was having trouble walking, he has no recollection of the event, and as far as his backstory goes, Stu was an Army veteran with PTSD, and wrestling was his escape to be able to help deal with his trauma and to cope with those demons in his life. And what I find really honestly disgusting is that Raja seems to be taking zero accountability for any of this. His manic rage and the comments that he was making on camera while he was walking down the street afterwards, covered in Stu's blood, to his simple, my bad, over the phone in the parking lot, to then the footage that came out of Rampage bringing it up to him today and him saying that he blames his cameraman for keeping the footage going instead of cutting it. That doesn't change the act that you committed. That doesn't change that there would have been multiple other cameras from either the show's feed or crowdsourced videos of you doing what you did. Absolutely insane that there is zero accountability for that. And also, Rampage has known himself that Raja is a powder keg that has just been waiting to erupt. In past interviews, Rampage has said that his other kids got college funds. Raja had a bail fund because he knew that he was a wild card and that the collegiate education and that journey and all of that was not what was going to be his path. That's an issue right there within itself. Raja also allegedly suffered a concussion just a couple of days before the incident in sparring. The head kick that buzzed him was caught on camera, so that might be something that halfway helps Jackson in his defense in saying that due to the existing head trauma and then the can that he wasn't of right mind and was acting in self-defense, but with it not being immediately after the can spot and then with the way that he assaulted Stu and then all of the things that he said on the stream, saying that, oh, I'll show you what a real crash out is. Oh, I've dreamed of knocking out a pro wrestler. All of these comments does not look good. I don't see any world where a jury sides with him. Raja is, by all accounts and for, in my observation, not that I followed him intensely or wildly close, but he seems like he's a 25-year-old kid who is trying to find his own identity while halfway still in his father's shadow. This could have been the opportunity for him to go out there with this Knox Pro show to get a little bit of notoriety for himself and not just be Rampage's son. as shown by the assault that he committed in the ring, he has a baseline skill set that would allow for him to be able to perform inside of the ring. But one of the most important things, and one of the things that makes sports entertainment at a high level so special or so great to watch, is the trust that the superstars, is the trust that the wrestlers have within each other to take care of each other while putting on the show. How can we make this look the most brutal, the most violent, the most gory, so on and so forth, while also being the safest and most protective of each other as we can? There's a strategic fashion in which they do this. That was not at all what Raja did. He violated every code of the business. He violated the Bushido code of martial arts. What he did in just 30 seconds probably just destroyed the rest of his life. Raja Jackson better not hope that Psycho Stu dies. Otherwise, the premeditation that he gave on his live stream potentially bumps this up to murder in the first degree. Next round. Islam Makhachev recently made some comments regarding American champs and saying that it's just not everything, or it's not as important to Americans as it is for foreign fighters, that for foreign fighters, it's something that is a certain sense of nationalist pride, that the whole essence of your being revolves around being that champion or putting on for your countrymen and your people. And while there is some of that to what he's saying, and because there is so many more options for sports, activities, extracurriculars, so on and so forth here in the States, he's not exactly on board either. Yes, I will absolutely recognize that there's no American male champions right now. But we're not too far removed from just having literally multiple. If John Jones didn't vacate, he would still be the heavyweight champion, an American. The champions by nation will vary and they go through waves in time, but the largest shares throughout history have came from the USA, Russia, and from Brazil. The waves of how these go, though, timing is everything. Within just, again, like I say, roughly the last year, we had multiple American champions, and then we also still have a lot of American contenders who are knocking on the door of getting potential title shots. Guys who just lost the belt within the last 365 days. Sean O'Malley, Bilal Muhammad, and the relinquishing of the title of John Jones. As far as American contenders who are right there on the fringe of fighting for a title, you have Corey Sandhagen fighting Merab in just a few weeks. I do believe that Corey Sandhagen's skill for skill is arguably the most talented guy on the planet. Fluffy Hernandez, he wins against RDR. He's potentially looking at a title shot. Justin Gaethje, right now, potentially looking at a title shot at 155 pounds. Sean Brady, possibly one fight out of a title shot at 170 pounds. We already spoke about Aljamain Sterling earlier on the program, in that Aljo is also, he's right there in the contender mix at 145 pounds. And then the hometown guy also in Brandon Raw Dog Royval, who is in the top ranks of the flyweight division. Obviously, that fight against Josh Van didn't go his way, but he's one fight away from being right back there in the mix of having a title fight potential or an opportunity in the fold. Last thing that we're going to talk about today, and I'm interested to see how many of you are going to be paying attention to it this week. There is the chance that it does actually have some decent take rate, being that there's Not really any major shows to keep your eyes on over the weekend aside from taking a look at this. There's Misfits Boxing that's going down. You have Darren Till taking on Luke Rockhold. You have Tony Ferguson taking on Salt Poppy. For the love of God, I hope Tony Ferguson pulls this off because if he can't beat an influencer in freaking Salt Poppy, I don't know what to say. And then lastly, the other notable from that card, you have Dylan Dennis, who has made it all the way through camp, just posted today for that matter about his preparation for this weekend in his MMA fight against Warren Spencer. Dylan Dennis has definitely been the black swan of the martial arts world over the last few years, but at one point in time, he did have some considerable hype behind his name. He was that big influence or that kind of number two guy to Conor McGregor. They were connected at the hip at one point in time. Dylan Dennis, way before the pandemic, I believe it was 2018, goes into the Bellator cage, makes his debut, gets a submission right away in the process. You know, he's had that heel role where he's feuded with a lot of major names within the industry over the years, and whatever he does, people still pay attention to whatever the long term run that he has still left in the sport, who knows? But I am interested to see him actually get back in there in the mix of having an MMA fight. The last time I believe that we saw him in any sort of meaningful scrapper competition was his fight against Logan Paul, and hey, he went out there and he tried. Dylan's not a boxer by any means. I think his route to victory in this fight is obvious, trying to grapple. But what do you guys think? Let me know. What do you think of the program today? Let us know online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery on Instagram or on Threads. Want to give a big thank you to everybody here at the Mile High Sports crew. Also want to give a shout out to Juan Archuleta for joining us here on the program. Make sure that you check him out on September 20th for that fight night in Las Vegas at the Theater at Virgin Hotels. We'll be back here next week, same time, same place. I'm Jordan Kurtz. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports.